So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Nowaki Schwartz, and I manage the environmental justice work at the California Coastal Commission. Staffers Sumi Salvaraj and Jordan Sanchez are also here with us, and we are so excited to be here with you today to get your input about adding environmental justice to our work. Some of you may be wondering what coastal protection has to do with environmental justice, but if you've ever gone to the beach on a hot summer day, or gone fishing off a public pier, or taken a hike in the Santa Monica Mountains, then you are familiar with our work. This agency and its staff have spent the past 40 years preserving the California coast for you, the public. So why are we here today? The Coastal Act already protects public access, and this agency has a long history of promoting public participation and equity. But last year, the governor signed AB 2616, giving the Commission new authority to specifically consider environmental justice when making permit decisions. And we are really excited to put this into practice. The commissioners and the agency completely supported AB 2616 and the passage of this, and we are really looking forward to launching this process to start the development of a new environmental justice policy. So one of the things that we want to do today is talk about ways that we can use this new authority to help the Commission make even better, stronger decisions that benefit underserved communities. The bill defines environmental justice as the fair treatment of people of all races, cultures, and incomes with respect to the development, adoption, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. It also cross-references existing non-discrimination and civil rights law in the government code. So as I said, AB 2616 authorizes the Commission to consider environmental justice and permit actions. It also requires the governor to appoint an environmental justice commissioner to our board, and that person is currently Vice Chair Effie Turnbull Sanders. We have formed an environmental justice team of enthusiastic staff members across the agency to work on this new policy. And your participation is critical and will ensure that the issues, places, and projects that you care about the most get the attention that they deserve. So in a nutshell, what we want to do here today is give you a baseline understanding of our agency, what we do, how environmental justice relates to our work, and how you can participate in the process. And just so you know, this webinar will be recorded and posted on our website, so feel free to share it with others. So at this point, I'd like to introduce one of our team members, Jordan Sanchez, who is a South Coast Enforcement Analyst. He's going to give you all some background on the Commission and the scope of our work.
Thanks, Milwaukee. I'm Jordan Sanchez, and I work in the Long Beach office. So to give you guys a little bit of background, the Commission is a state agency with a really important mission to preserve and protect California's coast and ocean. And we do this by regulating new development along the coast. In other words, we permit or deny new proposals and work with local governments to draft plans that reflect Coastal Act policies. Our history really is one of public participation. In fact, the Commission was created by a citizen initiative, Prop 20, which was passed by the voters in 1972. Californians were so concerned about pollution, habitat destruction, and the loss of public access along the coast that they passed a law to protect it. One of the events leading to Prop 20 was the 1969 oil spill off the Santa Barbara coast, one of the largest, and this was the largest oil spill ever in California waters. The spill killed thousands of seabirds, fish, and other wildlife. The sight of dead dolphins and seals washing up on shore fueled a public outrage, and that ignited the modern environmental movement. And this prompted lots of environmental legislation, including the California Coastal Act. This was a time when builders, corporations, and government agencies saw California's coast as a golden opportunity for development. They wanted to build Florida-style high-rise hotels along the shore, expand Pacific Coast highways to 4 lanes, build nuclear power plants from the Mexican border to Oregon, and much more. However, the people of California had other ideas. A group of dedicated activists drafted the Coastal Initiative and qualified it for the November 1972 ballot. They then launched a scrappy grassroots campaign. Developers, realtors, oil utilities, and other wealthy interest groups outspent supporters of the Coastal Initiative 100 to 1, but they lost. The proposition passed, and that led to the creation of the California Coastal Commission and later the Coastal Act. And this made the Commission a permanent state agency with broad authority over all new development along the coast. So I'd like to just read for you a key part of the Coastal Act, and this section really underscores how important public participation is to our culture here at the agency. The legislature further finds and declares that the public has a right to fully participate in decisions affecting coastal planning, conservation, and development, and that the achievement of sound coastal conservation and development is dependent upon public understanding and support, and that the continuing planning and implementation of programs for coastal conservation and development should include the widest opportunity for public participation. So what is the California Coastal Commission like today? We have about 165 staff in six district offices, all the way from the Oregon and California border down to the U.S.-Mexico border. Our staff planners, scientists, and attorneys make recommendations to the Commission on a variety of proposed developments and long-range local plans at monthly public meetings that are held throughout the state. The 12 voting commissioners are appointed by the governor, the Senate Rules Committee, and the Speaker of the Assembly. Also, the State Lands Commission, Caltrans, and the Natural Resources Agency attend our monthly meetings as non-voting members. This is a picture of the commissioners earlier this month in San Diego after the swearing in of our newest commissioner, Sarah Almanzada, who you can see there in the front of the picture. Our offices are located along the coast, as I said, from Arcata to San Diego, and each office covers certain cities and counties within the coastal zone. So as I mentioned, a key part of what we do is regulate development. The Commission's definition of development is very broad and includes both physical development like buildings as well as activities that impact public access. So for example, when people do sneaky things like post no parking or no trespassing signs to discourage public access, they get in trouble with the Commission because that is considered development. The area we regulate is called the coastal zone. The image on this slide shows the coastal zone in San Diego County, and the shaded area is the coastal zone, but you can see on this image that there are different coastal zone areas by jurisdiction. When someone wants to build something new in the coastal zone, they have to get a permit from the Commission or the city or county with a plan approved by our agency. This is where things get interesting because now those permits can address environmental justice for the first time, and now I'm going to hand it back to Milwaukee to talk about how that process works and how you all can participate in it.
Hi, everyone. It's Milwaukee again. So the Commission holds public meetings at different places around the state 1 week out of every month. And they vote on all sorts of things, ranging from projects to local plans to enforcement actions. We try and hear important items as close to the affected community as possible to maximize public participation input. Because as you know, public access doesn't mean access to just the beach. Access to decision makers and decision-making process is also critical. And I realize it sounds a little dry, but if you look closely at that slide, you can see that sometimes the meetings can get very lively. We've had hundreds of people show up to make sure their voices are heard. Some write speeches, others carry signs, and a few even come in costume. We've had people recite poems, show videos, and wear matching t-shirts. Again, the public is very important to this process, and I have personally seen how the number of people that show up and speak on an agenda item or write in ahead of time can impact a decision. The Commission has a long history of making strong decisions in favor of the environment and public access. Some of the most important things the Coastal Act does are protect and expand public access and recreation on the coast, protect lower-cost visitor serving opportunities, protect archaeological and cultural resources, protect scenic landscapes and views of the sea, protect environmentally sensitive habitat like wetlands and coastal sage scrub. It also protects the rare creatures that depend on those areas, such as the least tern and the burrowing owl. All of these policies I just mentioned come into play when we review permits for proposed projects. They ensure that any new development is consistent with coastal protection policies. And now, in addition to all this, the Commission can also consider environmental justice. And with your participation, we can really strengthen the Commission's ability to address those issues that you care about most. Now, another key member of our team, Sumi Selvaraj, will give some specific examples of how environmental justice fits into the Coastal Act and our work.
Thank you, Nowaki. I'm Sumi Selvaraj, a NOAA Coastal Management Fellow, and I hope after Nowaki and Jordan's presentations that you have a better understanding of how the Coastal Act has always been grounded in the principles of public interest and equity. The Commission has a proud history of applying the law in bold ways, and now I'm going to share some examples. One of the agency's prouder moments is when our public access policies ended racial and gender discrimination at a private club in Los Angeles. In the 1980s, the exclusive Jonathan Club wanted to expand its private, white, men-only clubhouse on the Santa Monica beach. The club sat on land at least from the city and state, but when the owners applied for a permit, the Commission said the club could only expand if they dropped their discriminatory membership practices. They refused and sued the Commission. The lawsuit went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, where the Commission prevailed. This case established that public access policies of the Coastal Act can actually be used to end discrimination on public lands. The Jonathan Club is still a private club, but now it accepts men and women of all races and faiths. A more recent example occurred last year after the Commission gained the ability to fine people who block public access. This was a big step forward. Last December, the Commissioners fined an oceanfront homeowner in Malibu over $4 million for blocking a public path to Las Flores Beach for over a decade. Only those who were willing to rent the house for $1,000 a night could have exclusive use of what should have been a public beach. We're currently fighting that one in court. Even though prior to AB 2616, the Commission acted on expanding public access, so why does the Commission need a new environmental justice policy now? Well, by adding this new authority under AB 2616, the legislature gave our agency a new way to consider environmental justice issues beyond those just involving public access. Really what this does is open the door for the Commission to consider whether environmental benefits are unequally distributed and could even lead to project redesigns or denials. So now I'd like to give all of you some examples of the types of coastal projects that could raise environmental justice issues. This is where the rubber will meet the road. I'm sure there will be more on the horizon, and we hope you'll help us bring those areas and issues to our attention. For example, sea level rise is going to threaten public beaches and many coastal communities. Higher water levels mean more erosion that could lead to beach loss. However, many homeowners will continue to push for more seawalls to protect their homes, and this could lead to loss of public beach through impacting beach erosion processes. The loss of public beaches will disproportionately impact people who can't afford to live near the beach. The Puente Power Project is a current example of how environmental justice concerns intersect with the Coastal Act. Puente is a new gas-fired power plant proposed at Mandalay Beach in Oxnard. The Commission doesn't have authority over this project. However, we sent a letter to the California Energy Commission pointing out how this project could harm an already overburdened community. This project has since been withdrawn, which is a big win for the environmental justice and coastal advocates who work really hard on this. The Commission also reviews projects with potential environmental hazard impacts. The Phillips 66 oil company wanted to build a rail spur in San Luis Obispo County to allow trains to deliver millions of gallons of crude oil every week through dozens of densely populated urban areas to the north. Opponents worried about the train's possibility of derailing and the potential health impacts and have fought the project to a standstill. But if and when this project comes before the Commission, any environmental justice impacts of the project will now be on the table along with impacts to coastal habitat. The Commission also reviews federal activities that may affect the coast. For instance, we will need to review President Trump's proposal to build a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. Last month, Attorney General Becerra sued the federal government over the wall on behalf of the state and the Coastal Commission, based partially on how it would damage plants and wildlife. Another ongoing issue is OCEANO Dunes State Vehicular Recreation Area. This 3,600-acre area is popular with off-roaders, but is also home to sensitive plants and animals. Downwind residents have complained about air quality and health problems from dust blowing off the sand dunes, We have reviewed their permit several times, but until now didn't have the authority to consider environmental justice impacts. I'm now going to share a clip from YouTube of one of our commissioners and what they had to say during the hearing of this permit. Give me a second. Pull it up.
Motion. I think it's important that I put a couple of thoughts on the record on the broader picture here, because this is something I think that touches every commissioner up here. It's a little emotional for all of us. As the chairwoman said, we try not to be emotional and be more rational, but passion is not always a bad thing. I think it's the right step in the right direction on this long-running mess, frankly. In the broader sense, I agree with the testimony from Sierra that it's overall wholly inadequate to the bigger, grander picture. I think the elephant in the room, frankly, is the land use provisions, the conflict between the requirements statutorily that we provide for recreational uses and the parameters and the intent of the Coastal Act. Frankly, I am shocked still that with respect to proximity to ESHA and with respect to certainly communities that have significant environmental justice issues, with respect to the provisions in the Coastal Act that deal with hazards, and that statute happens not to include something dealing with public health. Maybe that's a legislative idea. But it still amazes me that we allow vehicles and off-road vehicles to be driving around in ESHA dunes. It blows my mind. And somebody said it well earlier. It's like we have to weigh between the value of people's right to recreate in a cool way with abhorrent public health impacts. I mean, that's, to me, I'm sorry, in my world, forgive me if you think I'm crazy, but that in itself is ludicrous, that's even a discussion. Somebody had testimony earlier, and I respect everyone's position, that this is just, riding up on the dunes next to ESHA is just how they choose to enjoy the beach. And I just have to say respectfully, no. Not if your use of the beach destroys environmentally sensitive habitat area, creates significant public health hazards, by the way, that just accidentally happen to affect communities of color, communities of lower economic status, and present significant environmental justice issues. No, you do not have the right to do that. Not in California, not when the people of California in their millions, not once, not twice, but 3 times, have reaffirmed the values, the intent, and the structure of the Coastal Act. You just don't. And I think fundamentally there needs to be legislative remedies here. I think maybe we need to look at amendments to the provisions that deal with hazards, to include public health. Maybe there needs to be conversations between our commission and our appointing authorities who are in the legislative leadership and the governor that, hey guys, we need to put this on your radar, because there's this giant plume drifting into these communities, and there are people showing up in our hearings on oxygen tanks, and somebody needs to move a bill, because maybe we need to not just allow this to be happening in the coastal zone. I like to off-road too, but there's a lot of, it's a big state. And I don't know that it means that you got to do it next to the Pacific Ocean on a beach next to environmentally sensitive habitat area. And any suggestion otherwise, to me, is perfectly insane. So I'm pleased to support the permit, but I had to make those observations. I really respect your comments, Commissioner, on the environmental justice aspect of this. It's one that is near and dear to my heart. So thank you, Madam Chair, for letting me express those thoughts.
That was Commissioner Steve Padilla from Chula Vista speaking at the September meeting. Many other commissioners voiced similar concerns. I hope these examples gave all of you a more practical understanding of how this new environmental justice may be applied. Now, I'm going to hand it back to Nawaki, who's going to discuss next steps.
Thanks, Sumi. So where do we go from here? Last month, our environmental justice team, our executive director, and other senior management completed an environmental justice and equity training by Cali, PA, and Cal Recycle in Sacramento. And we were joined by State Lands Commission and the Lieutenant Governor's staff. State Lands manages state tidelands and public trust lands and works closely with us to maintain public access and protect the coast by regulating marine oil terminals and activities on state tidelands. And as we mentioned earlier, the State Lands Chair actually has a seat on the Coastal Commission. They're also in the process of updating their environmental justice policy. Both agencies plan to spend the next few months reaching out directly to environmental leaders and stakeholders around the state to identify groups and individuals interested in helping both commissions craft their new policies. But we really want to hear from you about what coastal issues matter most to you and how we can address those concerns. It's critical that our new environmental justice policies reflect your priorities and address the relevant needs of your communities. We want to do all we can to make sure that everyone has equal access to the benefits of coastal protection. And just so you're aware, our agency is also working on a parallel track process, creating a tribal consultation policy, and that's being handled by our Federal Consistency Unit. So we have created an email address where you can send your thoughts, suggestions, and concerns, and we are currently working on a contact list, but we could always use more contacts, and we would love to hear from you if you want to be involved in this process, because we are planning some more individualized meetings to get your input on what you'd like to see. And that email where you can reach us is environmentaljustice@coastal.ca.gov. We really want to start an ongoing dialogue that leads to a productive working relationship with interested groups. So please spread the word and think about whether and how you would like to weigh in on this new policy. So once we've heard from everyone, our team will organize and synthesize your input and begin drafting this new policy for public review and revision. The final draft will eventually be presented to the Commission at a public meeting for more input and further refinement as necessary. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to contact me, Milwaukee, at environmentaljustice@coastal.ca.gov. And thank you so much for your interest and time. And we hope to hear from you soon. Thank you.